This is part 4 in the Craftsman 6-inch joiner rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 3, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we will be cleaning and de-rusting the parts. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. The first thing we're going to be doing is soaking all of these parts in simple green for about 24 hours. So everything except for the electrical components, anything with graphics, or anything made out of paper. So plastic and steel and Zamek and all of that, and aluminum, all that's going to go into simple green. No problems at all. So I have a bin and I can fit a lot of the stuff in there. So we're going to load this stuff in here. As you can see, I have quite a bit of simple green. And I've sped up the footage here, and I've done this a lot during this video so that you guys don't have to sit there and watch 30 minutes of me doing something. So hopefully you can get a variety of all the stuff that I'm going to be covering in this video. But once we get everything loaded into this bin, then we'll start dumping the simple green in there. And this is concentrated simple green. I don't dilute it or anything like that. The great thing about simple green is I can reuse it. So I'll even show you how I reclaim it after these parts soak. But this, I don't remember. I think there's 10 of these. I think they're 2.5 gallons each. So, you can do the math and figure out how much is in there, but quite a bit that we fit into this bin. And this is simple green is a degreaser, and so that's why we're soaking this stuff in the simple green, because it will remove most of the grease and the oil that's on any of these parts, as well as a lot of the paint. So if you're working on something like this and you don't want to remove the paint, then use something else other than simple green. So I also was given recently a parts cleaner by my stepbrother. So I figured, hey, we'll put some of the smaller parts in that and see how that's doing. And I have simple green in it. And we're going to run those parts for 30 minutes in that parts cleaner. This is going to be all your nuts and bolts and screws and all that stuff, as well as a couple of other parts, but mostly the smaller stuff. And like I said, we'll run that for 20 minutes. It's the first time I've actually used this parts cleaner. All right, so the biggest part that I've got is the joiner body, and it's too big for that bin that I have. So I'm going to fabricate a bin for it. And basically I've just got some boards here that I'm screwing together that will be about 1 inch larger in width and in length, and a couple inches taller than the joiner body. You can see how it fits in there. So then I've got this 4mm sheet plastic, and I'm going to cut that so that I can basically just fill in this box that we've got with the plastic. Now there's no bottom on this, so you won't be able to move it. So I just set it outside, and then I'm going to put the plastic inside it. And then once we get it all pressed into there pretty well, we'll lock all the plastic sheeting down with some clamps so that it won't fall inside once it starts getting filled up. Then we'll put the joiner body inside there. And I probably should have gone with 2 inches around the body as opposed to 1 inch, because it's kind of a tight fit with that plastic in there, but it fits. And then we're going to fill it up with some simple green. So this is what you can do if you don't have plastic bins big enough for the stuff you're working on. And this will also work for the de-rusting that we're going to be doing later, although we're not going to de-rust this part the same way. So this held 5 gallons of simple green. I think those are 2.5 gallons. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're 2.5. I think I said 3.5 earlier, but I think they're 2.5. I pay about $19 for each one of those at Home Depot, which is a pretty good deal. So after 24 hours, we're going to remove and rinse those parts off. So actually 20 minutes later, we can remove the parts that are inside the parts cleaner. So we'll remove them and rinse them off. And you can see a lot of those came out pretty clean. So that parts cleaner works. And so we just take it over to the sink and rinse everything off. And now that we have all the grease and oil off of them, we can de-rust them. I think in my next workshop, I want a counter next to the sink so that I can have a place to set all this stuff. All right, so this is how I reclaim the simple green. Basically line up all the jugs, and then I've got a battery-powered siphon that I bought at like Harbor Freight. I've got a funnel, and then I've got a filter that I think it's a 125 micron paint filter. I've got like a whole stack of them or a whole box of them. So I'll use it for the first, 4 or 5 jugs and then switch out that filter because it'll get a bunch of debris in there. And this is to keep the simple green that I've got in the jugs usable the next time around. So we basically do the same thing outside with the joiner body. And this allows me to reclaim that that simple green, so I'm not spending hundreds of dollars on it on a fairly regular basis. And I reuse my simple green probably for about anywhere from 6 to 10 projects, and then I scrap it. It just kind of loses its strength at that point. So the way that we're going to de-rust the joiner body is with a wire brush. So we rinse all that simple green off, and then we're just going to scrub it with a wire brush because it's so big. And we could de-rust it with the citric acid. That's how we're going to do everything else. But for this, I'm also removing the paint, and the wire brush just does a really good job of taking care of that. So once that's done, we can towel dry it and set it aside. Now, all the steel parts are going in the citric acid for 24 hours. And that's a mixture of 1 teaspoon of citric acid per gallon of water. And do not soak Zamic or aluminum in citric acid. Or if you do, only do it for like an hour. Because if you let it soak for 24 hours, for whatever reason, the Zamic builds a film on it. But the steel parts, no problems whatsoever. And the cast iron, no problems whatsoever. So after we dumped all that citric acid in there, then we go ahead and fill that bin up with water. And you're going to want to do this outside because citric acid, once it starts working, it stinks to high heaven. It smells like rotten eggs. So don't do it indoors. But it's completely safe. It's food grade. You know, my dog can drink it. He might get a little sick, but it's not going to kill him. So after 24 hours, we remove all those parts, rinse them off, and then we're going to towel dry them. So I'm just going to set this other bin here and pull those parts out and set them in that bin. Then we'll take them inside and rinse them off. But we'll rinse off all the big parts outside with the hose. So we'll set those columns aside, rinse them off later. So like I said, the big parts will rinse off out here, and then we're going to take that big bin back inside and rinse all those other parts off in the sink. All right, so now we're just towel drying these parts. So the stuff that we rinsed off outside first, and all of this stuff, especially the cast iron, will build up a coat of surface rust real fast. So I don't like using compressed air or anything like that to get them dry. I use a towel, and even with using towels, they still develop surface rust on them. And the 100% humidity in Georgia doesn't help anyway. So again, we're rinsing parts off, and then we're taking them over to the table to dry them. And this is going to be just a whole bunch of back and forth of all of that. So this is kind of a labor-intensive process, but it's necessary. And if you didn't dry them off with a towel, if you just laid them out on a towel or whatever, tomorrow they'd just be a block of rust again. So the surface rust really isn't going to be an issue. We can mitigate it once we get into the painting. But you really need to have kind of a decent workflow in mind when you're doing this. Otherwise, you're going to get to a stopping point because you have to go fix dinner for the wife and kids or whatever. And then you come back down and you're dealing with big blocks of rust again. So everything I'm putting on the far side, at least right now, is parts that's not going to get paint. And everything that's on this side of the table that I'm on will get paint. So it's actually kind of a small amount of parts that aren't getting paint. Mostly that stuff in the corner. And then you can see the swinging blade guard up there near the top of the screen, and the parts that were with it, that's all Zamek and aluminum stuff that did not go into the derusting process. So more parts, rinsing them off. And like I said, that simple green will take most of this paint off. And if you really want to make sure the paint is gone, you can hit these items with a wire brush while you're rinsing them off, and that'll get most of that paint off of there. So on drill presses, a lot of times, especially with this this Craftsman gray that was used during this time frame, it doesn't want to release from the metal a lot of times. And I'll have to use a stripping compound, like I use Citric strip, and that does a really good job of removing the paint. But on this item, on this joiner and on the motor, I'd say a good 90% of the paint came off, so we won't have to do any serious stripping. Again, all those parts that are going across the table from me are not getting paint. So what we're going to do here in a minute is go to the other side of the table and coat those parts in WD-40. And the WD-40 is not a long-term solution to keep them from rusting because WD-40 has water in it, so those parts will rust over time. But this is kind of just a stopgap measure until I can get to wire wheeling all these parts or cleaning them up in the lathe. So we'll just spray them down with the WD-40. And obviously we're taking care to not get the WD-40 on the parts that are at the bottom of the screen because all that stuff is getting paint. Maybe I should have sped this content up as well. And we did the same for all the nuts and bolts and screws and stuff. After we rinsed them off and dried them off, we went ahead and coated them with WD-40 as well. So with the rotor, we're just spraying down the shafts really, because we're going to be cleaning those up in the lathe. Haven't really figured out how I'm going to clean that yet. Probably just with the wire wheel. All right, so speaking of wire wheels, so these are parts that are going to get paint and they have not been cleaned up or no WD-40 has been applied to them. But for instance, that pin needed to get cleaned up, and any of the milled surfaces on these parts are going to get masked off before paint. So cleaning them up with the wire wheel, and if there's rust in areas that aren't milled, that's not a problem. You know, the paint and the primer will take care of that. But cleaning most of these parts up, specifically where they're milled, is the goal that I'm doing here with the wire wheel. So these are the dovetails for the tables. And no, I'm not wearing flip-flops while I'm doing this. Not that you could tell, but yeah. Okay, so the rear table has this protrusion from the casting that I wanted to grind down. So I'm just using an angle grinder to grind it, and then it will be ground. Get that out of the way. And then we're going to prepare this table for paint. And what that means is I'm using this triangular grinder or sander to, or it's technically called a multi-tool, I guess, to clean up the milled surface on the bottom. And we'll be masking that. And then we'll flip it over. and clean up the table surface with a oscillating sander. So this is, I think I'm using 220 grit, and we're not trying to do anything crazy here. We're just removing that surface rust that already developed there. And the tables on this joiner are in great shape, so nothing crazy like resurfacing or anything like that. And you've got this edge on this side over here that is also milled. And then we'll wipe those parts down with paper towel. And then we'll mask those parts off. So we'll just speed up through this masking process, but you'll see everything that gets masked. And then we clean up that masking tape with an X-Acto knife. And the other thing you're going to want to do at this point is probably with a nylon brush, just brush down the cast iron to remove any lint from the towels when you towel dried everything. Because once you get to the painting process, you know, that it'll show up big time with the primer. But nothing crazy here. I mean, this is fairly easy. It's just, you know, it takes patience and a lot of time, but and a lot of tape, but nothing here is beyond anybody's capabilities. And to be honest with you, I really don't know that those milled surfaces on the bottom, for instance, need to be masked off, but they weren't painted originally, so that's why I'm masking them off. Everything that's milled will get masked off. And if you think this is boring, well, the next video is going to be a whole lot of this. And hopefully some painting. But for somebody that's going to rebuild one of these, I'm sure they've got questions on how I went about masking and painting, and so that's why I'm showing all of this. But that's going to wrap up this video. If you liked it or you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. In the next video, we will be masking a whole bunch and hopefully painting. So I appreciate the support, and as always, I will see you next time.